Okay, welcome to part 3 of articulation and resonance, and this will conclude the unit on this topic. So in the previous video, we spoke about the vowels and the consonants, and then we looked at the consonants and divided them into two categories: resonant sounds, and these are 7 sounds that are all voiced, and they are quite similar to vowels in the fact that all of them are voiced. And we looked at them and said, divided them into 3 groups. The first group is liquids, and then glides, and then nasals. There's no sequence to them, so you could nasals, liquids, and glides, whatever, but there are 7 sounds. And then we explained why they're called resonant sounds, and then we looked at the other side, which is non-resonant sounds, and these sounds are distinguished by some kind of significant constriction or obstruction in the vocal tract, especially in the oral cavity. And resonance occurs in front of the constriction, between the constriction and the lips, and whatever space is available is going to be the space for resonance, where the air resonates. So the amount of air that's available, the size of the cavity that's available in front of the constriction, is what's going to determine resonant frequency, and behind the constriction, that part is not engaged in the resonance process. We looked at non-resonance and divided them into 3 categories. There are basically 2 major groups, and then which are the stops and the fricatives. We said the stops are 3 cognate pairs and a single, and then the fricatives are 4 cognate pairs and a single. And the third group is a combination of stops and fricatives. There are only 2 sounds of them, which are the ch and the j. You notice that t is voiceless, sh is voiceless, and d is voiced, and j is voiced. So each 2 that make the affricate are the same kind of quality in terms of voicing. So ch is voiceless and j is voiced. So now let's look and discuss this a little bit further in this class. Production of stops requires complete closure of the vocal tract and some location. You can, kind of look at the locations that are possible where you can block the vocal tract. First one, if you bring the lips together and stop the air, like when you say p and b, that's the first part, bilabial stops, p and b. And then you go back a little bit to the alveolar ridge, t and d. These are the next 2 stops, and you call them alveolar stops. And keep going back. The next possible pair is the k and g, which is both of them are velar. And then you go down to the glottis itself, where you produce the glottal sound, glottal stop. So these are the 7 stops. So you notice the air is completely shut down, and then you release, and the air makes some kind of little explosion. And for this reason, if you focus on the explosion of the sound after the stop, you could call them plosives. And if you focus on the obstruction and the air pressure building behind it and all of these dynamics, then you can call them stops. So both names, plosives or stops, are both acceptable. It depends on if you are looking at the glass as half full or half empty. So once you produce the blockage, the closure, the air pressure, BIO, means pressure interoral. So interoral pressure inside of the vocal tract is going to build up, and then as you release, that pressure is vented or is decreased. So oral release yields the noise that we know, and sometimes we call the release burst or the little plosion sometimes. So these are the stops we described, the two at the lips, p and b, and alveolars t and d, and velars k and g, and then the glottal stop. So the bilabial stops you require the orbicularis oris to produce them. Two lips come together, are constricted and close. P, b. The alveolar stops you require the superior longitudinal muscle to lift up the tongue tip. But you also make sure, take note of this, you also require the genioglossus to enable you to put pressure so you can you can produce all alveolar sounds. I mentioned that in a class before in the first when we started to speak about this in class. So you need to add here the genioglossus is quite active in producing alveolar sounds, including alveolar stops. The velar stops, kahanga, you need the styloglossus muscle and the palatoglossus that we discussed before, and also the tongue dorsum, the dorsum of the tongue, the back middle of the tongue rises to meet the velum. So the contact can be either velar or palatal, depending on vowel context. What does that mean? Say the word egg, egg. So when you say egg, or let's make it even more clearer. Say eeg, eeg, e. Regardless if there's a word like that or not, or you can say igloo, eeg. So because the tongue is far and front, when you say e, then the borderline between the hard palate and the soft palate is the area where you make the k and g. But when you say e, the tongue is already far ahead to front and high. Then you want to come back and say egg, so, or eggs, eggs, eggs. So you go here, and then before you cross the line where the palatal aponeurosis is, before you cross it, you stop at the very, very end of the hard palate itself when you say eggs or eggs. So the placement here, the back of the tongue, contacts the very far end of the hard palate. For this reason, that could be palatalized as you make a word, not a sound. So in context, when you speak spontaneous speech, then this happens, but not in single sounds. In single sounds, when you say ka and ga, both of them are velarized. However, one is voiced, one is not. So now, when you say, for example, goofy, goofy, goofy. Oo is back, the tongue is back and high, and you are saying g, so you get ready to go back and to go up. So in an anticipation, then the back of the tongue goes further back into the hard palate, into the soft palate or the velum itself, and that is again in anticipation. It makes just the placement back. The vocal folds, of course, for the glottal stop, the vocal folds come together, slam, and then just open again. They do not vibrate. To vibrate, you need to bring them together and pause, and then have the edges vibrate. But not in that case. You just go here, close, and bring them the arachnoids together, and after that, hold them and then vibrate. But that again, for the glottal stop, the arachnoids just go and then back. The acoustic qualities stops have something that is called voice onset time. That's a very, very important concept. I'd like you to understand it and to know how it works. First, there's a silent gap between the closure and the implosion of the air, or the release of the air. So it is found when you see here in the spectrogram, when you say, for example, pa, 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 pa. So that gap here, after the there is no activity at all. You are now holding the air and there is no activity. That's silence. And then the release, when you say pa, that aspiration that comes at the end of the pa, then that shows a little bit of activity here. And that is, along these formats. And that is the noise or the release burst. And then you say, it becomes notably clear with its formats, F1, F2, and F3. When I say, ba, so you could see here in the silent gap in between the and then the other There's no noise because ba is voiced, then you switch directly into another vowel, so there isn't much noise here. When you say ta, you could see how the t is going to last longer because you close your airway longer. And when you say ta versus pa. So again, this little narrow band here, that is the release or the aspiration, the air puff that comes out after you say the ta. The da, you have the closure, and then you move on, and you don't see that aspiration because, when you say ta, it doesn't exist in da, as a da. You move directly to a vowel. And the same for ka, but you don't find it in ga. So these are all just the puff of air that is released with the voiceless stops, but the voiced ones, they do not have that. All of them have the silent gap here, 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 right after the vowel, between the vowel and the consonant itself. They also have some, formant transitions when they, as you transition to a vowel before, that was before to them, or after. You have the, they show formant transitions as you see it here. So the release burst, it lasts for about 10 to 30 milliseconds based on the context. So bursts of voiceless stops are longer because of the aspiration. When you say kite, so at the end, that's called aspiration, like that puff of air that comes at the end of the sound when you release it. So again, voiceless stops are longer because of that aspiration part. And then the release is not a very common characteristic of American English. Like when we say tight, you don't say tight. It's more like tight. It is not very hard, closure, and it doesn't have that much air in it. The energy release is mostly focused between 500 hertz and 1500 hertz for the stops. So they're kind of basically tend to be in the lower frequency range. This is for bilabial, bilabials, mostly bilabial stops. But for the alveolar stops, because now when you say the bilabial, you engage the entire, you make a big tube and the whole thing is now, there's a lot of air pressure and that is different. But when you say alveolar stops, now you have that from the alveolar ridge to the lips. That is the space that you use, and it is quite limited. So it makes the frequencies about 3,000 to 4,000. So, and the small cavity, again, in front of the alveolar ridge, between it and the lips, it becomes a high pass filter. It means it passes high frequency sounds. The velar stops range from 1500 to 4000, and because velar, you go here to the ka, ga, you have the entire, a huge cavity from here to the lips, like 3.5 or 4 centimeters. So that makes this kind of range from 15 to 4,000, just because it depends on the context. If there's a vowel, a high frequency vowel that comes before them or after them, they are affected. But this is what you have, is a range that says from 1500 hertz to 4000 hertz. This is depending on the position and the following vowel. The bilabel stops are the lowest, which are 600 to 800. So if you take all of these values, average them, that gives you the initial one that's between around 15 to 1500 is for most, like on average. Now, the stops, when you say them at the beginning, like if you have a stop at the beginning of a syllable, like pam, pat, or tack, this is called the syllable initial stop, like the stop that comes at the beginning of a syllable. These are particularly distinguished by voiced onset time. Voiced onset time is something that is important to look for to kind of look for neurological damage, and in some cases, like for example, some diseases like Parkinson's, voiced onset time might not be consistent with norms. So voiced onset time is the time between the stop and the stop release and the phonation onset. Like when you stop, you have blocked. As you release, immediately do the vocal folds start vibrating at the same time as the release, or do you release first and then the vocal folds start to pick up, or do the vocal folds vibrate first? And let's see how it goes. So the voice onset time for voiced stops, there are, how many voice stops are there? The stops are 7. The one that's between the glottis, that occurs at the glottis, is voiceless. So you have 3 pairs. How many are voiced? So yeah, that's right. So you divide, there are 3 cognate pairs. Each pair has 1 voiced and 1 voiceless. 1 voiced, 1 voiceless, 1 voiced, 1 voiceless. So you have the voiced ones, the duh, as in dime, and the other one is the b, as in bite, and then duh as in dime, and then the g. So you could say b, d, g. That is the voiced ones. For these sounds, the voice onset time values are negative or minus 20 to plus 20 milliseconds. What do you mean negative, minus 20? Minus 20, it means that voicing occurs before the release. Okay? So for example, say b. Just say it with before you, like you want to say, banana, but before, exaggerate before you release. Can you make vibration before you release the b? Yes, you can, and you can hear it. So that is, again, is the case with voicing only voiced stops that have a release before, some of them before you actually release the sound. So, and then they go to 20 milliseconds. For example, when you say you haven't released, there's voicing here, and then depending on the context, of course, also when you say G. So the range again, they can start before the release, and then you continue to it can also start 20 milliseconds after the release, depending on the context. Now, consistently now, for the voiced onset time for voiceless sounds, the 4, which is the p, the k, the k, and these 4 stops. In all cases of these 4 stops, the vocal fold vibration occurs after the release, and it can be 25 milliseconds after, and it can go even up to 100 milliseconds after the release, but in all cases it is after the release. So there are 4 categories of voice onset time based on the characteristics that we'll discuss. First, there is pre-voicing pre-voicing voice onset time lead. That is when the vibration occurs before the release. And again, that happens only in the case of the voiced stops, like b, d, and g. And 0 voice onset time. That's when the vibration and release occur simultaneously, and that also occurs only, it can only occur when you have the voiced stops, which are b, d, and g. Here, if you go back here, you can see voice onset time for voiced stops is -20 to +20. So these are the only sounds where release is possible, where voicing is possible before the release. Okay? It is not possible for the voiceless. So the first 2 conditions here, pre-voicing voice onset time lead and 0 voice onset time, both of them apply only to voiced stops. 0 onset, it means both of them occur at the exact same time. And then the other one, short lag voice onset time, it applies to voiceless consonants, and it might apply to some situations of the voiced ones. But the vibration in this follows the release shortly after. Like for example, it could be 20 milliseconds after. It could be 10 milliseconds, could be 30, 40. So that applies to, sounds voiced or voiceless, depending on the context where the sound occurs. Long lag voice onset time, basically it characterizes only the voiceless consonants, but it means that the voicing occurs long after, there's a long delay after the release, a long delay for vibration to occur. Let's look at an example here. So here you have the p sound, and here you have the b sound. The p sound is plotted here, the b is here, and you have the vocal tract as it goes into closing, holding, releasing, and the vowel. Obviously, when you say the sound p, the only way that you can release it, if you wanna hear it, you are gonna release it into a vowel. So you say pa, pa, or this other one you say ba, ba. So these are cognates. It means that the same placement, as you could see, the oral cavity is going to go through the same placement, and it will go through the same, the sounds will have the same manner in production, closure, and the only difference is voicing. So first, to make either one of them, you bring the lips together with bilabial. As you close, with the p, the vocal folds haven't even started, the arytenoids haven't even started to swing and bring the vocal folds to the midline. When you say pa. So now you hold and pressure builds up more, maximum. And then as you hold, the arytenoids start to swing to the midline. So, and then you are releasing here, you are releasing the air, and then the vocal folds are still halfway, they haven't closed yet, because you want to make the sound ah at the end, pa. So the air continues to be released, and then finally you come to saying the ah, pa. So that's quite a long delay in that regard. Now let's look at the b. You put the lips together, and then immediately, this millisecond that the lips get together, the vocal folds start to, the arytenoids start to swing the vocal folds to the midline. And you close, you hold the lips, and they are halfway. Look, compared to that, they are halfway ready to close. And this very millisecond that you release, then you are now vibrating them. And then the vowel continues, you continue vibrating because there's phonation when you say b, 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 and there's phonation in the vowel, so that continues directly from the phonation for the b to the ah. So you could see that this is occurring exactly for the b in this context, exactly at the very same time that you open the lips to release them, the vibration occurs, and then it continues to the end of the vowel. Now let's look at the acoustics of the stops, acoustics of like the resonant characteristics of them in the vocal tract. So first, formant transitions occur, formants occur as the release of the stops transitions to the adjacent vowel. So you are moving from the stop to a vowel, because you can't release them except for, if you want to make an affricate then. But typically when you say one single sound, as you say it, you release it into a stop like pa, pa, da, ka, ga. This is how you tell me what sound are you speaking about. I say ka, ga, da. We don't speak about spelling and stuff. We just say the sound, and then we put a vowel either before or after to make the sound possible to say. So formant transitions usually last around 50 milliseconds. So for F1, for example, formant transition for F1 starts extremely low in frequency, almost close to zero. So if you look at the transition here, you want to say that that is a little transition where you make some air aspiration, noise here, and then you transition to the sound. So the voiceless, there is a little bit of a delayed transition, but you look at the voiced ones, there is almost like zero. There's no break in between. You say ah, ba. As soon as you release, you transition directly into the next vowel for the voice sounds, because a voice sounds, the vocal folds are vibrating, and the d and the other ones are also vibrating. So the fricative sounds, first, they are characterized by in all cases, the obstruction here at the alveolar ridge, for example, or at between the lips and the upper teeth, or whatever it is, that there's significant noise that is created in the oral cavity. That noise is, I call it noise because it is aperiodic. It is very kind of a mixture of all kinds of sounds. It is not periodic. So we have two groups of fricatives. Some voiceless, where there is no vocal fold vibration at all. And then all you get are the aperiodic tones from the oral cavity or the vocal tract that make noise or aperiodic sounds. And then for the voiced ones, you got vocal fold vibration. And in addition to that, you get the noise from the vocal tract, especially the oral cavity, and that will be the mix. So to produce them, you have that constriction that creates turbulence, and we described the labiodental fricatives, f, v, and you notice we trace them from front and go back, and then lingua dentals, or you call them also interdentals, th and the, and alveolars, s and z, and then you have palatal sounds, sh and zh, and then you have the glottal fricative, h. So these are the 1, 2, 3, 4 cognates and the single. So they are 9. So the labiodental fricatives, you require to produce them, the lower lip in contact with the maxillary incisors, f, and then v, and the orbicularis muscle, that is the inferior area, that's the lower lip. Linguodental fricatives linguodental or interdental, require the tongue tip to be placed between the upper and lower incisors, the calaris. And you also need the superior longitudinal tongue muscle to lift up the tongue tip, but remember, you also require the genioglossus to be able to protrude the tongue out of the lips. I intentionally leave some details that are like this, and I want to make sure that you listen to the class, the videotape class, or if you are in the classroom, you listen and fill in these things. So again, the genioglossus contributes to production of the linguodental or the interdental fricative sounds, in addition to the superior longitudinal tongue muscle. So basically, when you make these sounds, the cavity that is available for resonance is very, very tiny. Now, guess what the frequency is going to be like? So it's going to be a very, very high frequency that could go 5,000, 6,000, or even 7,000 in some cases. So it has a wide frequency bandwidth in that case, that frication noise. So when we make now go back, now we took the interdentals and the labiodentals, these 4, and then we go back to the alveolar ridge, where we make the the s and z. So the tongue forms a constriction at the alveolar ridge with the help of the genioglossus and the superior longitudinal tongue muscle, and the air is going to flow through the middle of the tiny groove between the tongue tip and the alveolar ridge. So it produces that fricative sound. And the size of the space or the cavity from the alveolar ridge to the lips makes it a very small cavity that is going to make frequency high, because it's a small space. For the palatal fricatives, what you do, if you go and switch midstream as we did it in class, or no, not this second example, sorry, or or and in both cases you are here for the alveolar sounds, when you say sh, the tongue goes back and up, and that leaves about 1/3 to, or approximately about 1/3 of a centimeter, or a quarter of an inch added as it goes back. It will free that space that is going to make the cavity bigger all across. So you have a bigger cavity from here to the lips, and that is going to make palatal fricatives shorter or higher than alveolars. If you have a larger cavity, and you say the relationship between frequency and cavity is like goes in opposite ways. So when volume is bigger, frequency goes lower, and the opposite is true. So this is why the palatal fricatives sh and j have lower frequency than the fricative sounds. That's a very important thing that you need to understand. So here you can see how they are plotted on the spectrogram. Like when you say fa, fa, you can find a lot of all these noises. You don't have a distinct formant, for example, for this, but you have noises along these formants that go up to 8,000. So the of course, that's the pure tone, and you are going to have formants. The before is the same. So va, you notice there's less noise here with the va, because it has periodic, it has some pure tones from the vocal folds. Tha, look here, and you say tha, you have less noise again in that. So sa and azza, and then asha and aja. And in both cases, when you look at the voiceless, they have a lot more noise because there is no pure tone with them. The ha is it's basically produced between the vocal folds. It's a glottal sound, and there's no supraglottic constriction. There's no constriction above. At that time, because what you do is you bring the vocal folds close together, approximated, and you do not they don't vibrate. They are not close enough to vibrate. So the that movement is going to produce some turbulent noise, and at the glottis between the vocal folds, and that will make the sound. But it is voiceless. So the resonance of fricatives depends on the size of the cavity that is in front of the obstruction. For example, f goes between 4,500 and 7,000. That is, again, because the cavity is very, very tiny, and it depends on the space, what comes before the fa and what comes after. For the tha, it is, as in bath, it goes up to about 5,000 hertz. Because you add more now. It has more room relatively than the fa and ba. The affricate sounds, they consist of a stop released into a fricative. So a stop is like the t, you release into a ch. So I'm into a sh. So it will be ch, as in chair or catch. Oh, and the j, as you have a voiced stop released into a voiced fricative. So you get the j, as in page or judge. So you can see the affricates, they basically combine the same qualities as the stops and the fricatives. So in both stops and fricatives, for example, you are going to have the silent voiced closure before you release, and you're going to have a release burst, and then you have the frication noise. And you could see how they are plotted in the spectrogram. So it's a cha. So you get ah, and then pause, and like the stop, ah, t, and then shh, and then you move into the ah. There's a little gap in between here. And a jaw, you notice the gap is very small. It doesn't even exist. A jaw, because the formant transition is faster for voice sounds. This is an exercise. If you could probably use it to say, describe every consonant. What is that sound? It is a bilabial, a voiceless bilabial stop. What is this sound? It is a voiced bilabial and velar and glide. Now I'll show you this sound. We didn't discuss it, but this is not an English sound. It is a lateral lisp, and a lateral lisp is part of some African languages, but some people kind of produce, may have some articulation errors, speech sound errors, and they produce the alveolar sounds like s, s, and z, and the palatal sound sh and j as like smile, cat, mat. So that is called a lateral lisp, and this is the symbol for it. Now let's look at the relationship between co-articulation and suprasegmentals. In that case, co-articulation is defined as the way in which two or more articulators move spontaneously to produce two or more different phonemes, so together. For example, if you want to say the word two, U is rounded and protruded. T is neutral. T. So when you say two, before you say the T, before you start to say the word, because there's silent gap too, you are going to round your lips when you say the T. When you want to say the word stoop, so you notice that the T immediately is rounded as you move on to say, before you even say the U, so stoop. If you want to say the word, for example, K, the sound K, and then say key, before you say before you say the whole word, as you say, you start, your lips are retracted. Key. So this is what co-articulation is. It's basically, you anticipate a sound that is coming and spontaneously work on making both sounds at the same time. Suprasegmentals, they have different names as well, but they include how the stress patterns are, like what syllables have lax and tense sounds, and looking at the pitch, intensity, and duration. So pitch, of the sound of the sounds or words can be high or low, and intensity can be high or low. Duration, obviously, how long it takes to make something, to say something. These things change as we speak, so that you can make your speech dynamic. You can remember the variability rates for pitch and intensity. You raise and lower your pitch continuously as you speak, so that if you do not do that, then you shift or switch into a monotone. So that these three aspects actually create melody of speech or intonation of speech. Now, this is also a very important thing that you need to understand. What are the differences between stressed syllables and unstressed syllables? First, stressed syllables have they have higher frequency. The The reason is that the vocal folds tension is greater and they have higher subglottic pressure. And then stressed syllables also have a longer duration because they typically have a tense sound. So the articulators move from move to more extreme positions when you make longer duration sounds. And then greater intensity, it means they are louder when you produce them. The stressed syllables are louder, relatively louder, when you produce them. This is just a way to show you the curve. But basically, the last thing I want to emphasize is that I needed to understand the difference between stressed syllables and unstressed syllables. 1, 2, 3 things that you need to understand. So this concludes the unit on articulation and resonance, and I hope that you review this more than once, and that you make questions for your colleagues and test them and explain and have them question you and test you so that you can have that practice. And next time we will post the end of the speech motor system, and after we'll post the hearing component. So thank you.